This is Hector Mirai with Faith and Phantom, and this is the Artists Alley Aftermath for Wilkes Comicon Spring 2025. That's a whole mouthful, but here we are. This is my second show with Adventura Comic-Con Company. I did their Boone show in the winter, and I did their Wilkes show for the first time just the other day. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit and what that whole experience was like. And yeah, that's what we're here for. Starting off the 2025 con season with a bang. We are just two events in so far. I don't know. We've done a handful of things already. It kind of gets blurry. But yeah, we did a con on Saturday. Let's talk about it. First of all, this con was in Wilkesboro, North Carolina, which is far away. It's roughly 3.5 hours long. Now, I added to the longevity and what's the right word? Extenuating circumstances of this show by through the efforts of my own ridiculousness. So, Thursday night, this is pre-show discussion. Thursday night, I ended up driving to Burlington, North Carolina and back because Ren Collective was having a concert, and Ren Collective is one of my favorite worship bands. In general, they're probably in my top 10 bands, period, but they are my favorite purveyors of sonic worship. It's just a good time. A lot of their music hits me hard, especially right now, the song Fight of My Life. And I was supposed to have D&D that night, but it had to get rescheduled, so I was able to take my kids to see Ren Collective, front row. Like, it was easy, good time. But that was roughly almost 6 hours of driving that I wasn't planning on doing this weekend because I didn't think I had that option. So even going into Friday for the con, I had already put 6 hours in driving the day before. But I worked my work day at the college and loaded up and headed on the 3.5 hour drive to Wilkesboro, North Carolina. And I stopped at a Sheetz. I stopped at a Sheetz to get dinner and keep on moving. And I got to the hotel and just kind of crashed out and watched some anime. Sorry, been a long day. Watched some anime and drank some coffee and just slept because it had been like almost 9.5 hours of driving in a 24-hour window, and I was tired. And it was going to be a long day the next day. But stayed at Red Roof Inn? Yeah, Red Roof Inn. Right in the middle of Wilkesboro, so not too far. A lot of shows have access to set up the day before. And this show technically did, but you could only set up from 2 to 5. And being 3 hours away, there was just no way I was going to make it to there with my work day and everything else. But anyway, I got some rest, was up bright and early the next morning, 6ish, to go load in, stopped at the hotel breakfast, and that was a sad state of affairs. I know you can't gauge a whole hotel experience by how good the breakfast is, but man, it's a good indicator. Hotel wasn't bad, but like the breakfast just made me sad in my soul. So I grabbed a yogurt, and walked out the door. Got to the con and got lost just trying to get into the building because it's a really weird dynamic of where and how this place goes. And it took me to a chain link fence. Like, you had to go down almost a dirt or gravel road to get to it. It was moderately awkward. But you pull in between two buildings, and there is a ramp, thank the Lord. Because I was not trying to lift all these books upstairs. Sorry. If I wish I could make this podcast content when I'm not sleepy, but this is literally my third podcast of the night. Did a Love Thy Nerd interview earlier and just did the 180, and so I'm just trying to be on my hustle here, getting this juicy mediocre content all up in your ear holes. But yeah, I got in there, found my table. It was a very tight space. I made the judgment call not to put up my t-shirt rack and not to put up my banner because there just literally wasn't room. And I would have greatly inconvenienced the people behind me and probably exasperated the circumstances I was already in. Because it was gonna be a grind to survive in that space. So got everything set up. It did take me the better part of 2.5 hours to get completely set up. Now, one positive I will say about Adventura's shows, and the crew that runs it, is they provide food. They had coffee and danishes and bagels and croissants for all the vendors while they set up. And then as part of the registration process, you get to pick which kind of pizza you want. You can get a slice of pizza that they'll deliver to you at some point during the show. So that's nice. And then after that, the showrunners will literally roll a little cart around with snacks and offer you a bag of chips or a candy bar or something. So they're up on the hospitality for sure. I was next to a lady who was an artist, who did individual paintings, no prints, just each piece was individual for sale. And that was cool. I was across from an author, and behind me was a paranormal group. It's kind of all over the place. But I got set up and walked around and bought some little gifties for my kids and friends. And sent dice photos back to my D&D group. And so it was pretty chill getting set up. The lady directly beside me, didn't show up until maybe the last hour, so I had plenty of time to set up without being cramped in a space. But once that point came on, it was hard to get in and out. Show started. Pulled out the handy dandy sketch cards and got to work drawing. And every city, every town is different. You literally never know what you're going to get. And this was the first time in a very long time I did a show where I ran into nobody that knew me. I'm not claiming I'm famous, but I get around a lot. And usually there's at least one person per show who I know or who have come to my booth before or something. And this show literally was completely pristine, untouched in that capacity. So like even when I was in like Tennessee, there were people who knew of me. Even when I was in Kentucky, there were people that knew of me from friends of a friend. This was like complete stranger town. I don't say this with any ugliness, but it was kind of astonishing. For the first hour and a half, not only did nobody like stop at the booth or talk to me, people straight up cold ignored me. Like if I said, hello, good morning, deadpan, look away, no acknowledgement. And it wasn't just like one person, it was everybody. I was straight up like shunned, I say. I was so shunned. And then like I heard a couple old ladies, ugh, look at this. Well, I guess they allow priests at Dragon Con. And like literally that was the most interaction I'd had, was the ladies like saying the Dragon Con thing. So I was just like, oh man, this is going to be a terrible day. And this show only costs $40. Now, if you factor in a hotel and $40, it's still cheaper than half the shows I do. But either way, eventually a young lady came by the booth in all Moon Knight gear, like Moon Knight t-shirt, Moon Knight backpack. And she's like, hey, do you have anything Moon Knight? And I think at one point I had pins, but I didn't have any at that point. I said, I don't. But I'll tell you what, if you come back by in like 20 minutes, I'll sketch you a Moon Knight. Like, what's your favorite Moon Knight? And I was like, and listen, if you don't want it, you don't have to get it. So I sketched her a Moon Knight, I think, which you can see on my Instagram. And maybe, I don't know if I actually put it up there. I might need to go add that. I'll add it now. If it's not already on my Instagram, I'll add it to my Instagram. But I had, was just kind of like taken back by the whole response. So I was just like really grateful somebody was relatively kind to me. She came back, she liked my Moon Knight, she got that in 2 pins, and I was like, okay, at least somebody interact with me. Then a little bit later, I had, what was really the turn of the day. A parent came over and was just like really going through everything. And, we got to talking about like convictions and, how she wasn't sure, if she was in the wrong for liking certain things. And me, I don't ever try and convince people, do this or don't do that. But she literally loves Harry Potter, but is slightly convicted about Harry Potter. So I went over what the books were and talked to her, and I was like, and I went to Romans 14, which if you've ever been a part of the Faith and Fandom discussion panel at cons, Romans 14 is always a big discussion point, because I believe that is firmly the best passage in terms of understanding how your convictions need to play into what you invest yourself into. I think Romans 14 is the best and clearest passage on those things. But we got talking, and her kids were coming around, and like, in the middle of the whole conversation, I start hearing a dude somewhere in the vicinity, start speaking in theological terms. And I hear a dude yell, propitiation. And I'm like, oh, there's a Jesus conversation coming. Somebody is straight up like laying down the fullness of Christ in this building. And sure enough, it was the husband of the lady I was talking to. And then he started laughing about the turd sticker, and he hung around. And I got to talk to this family for a while, and got to, I feel like, be an encouragement to them. They were an encouragement to me. They ended up getting like stickers and sketch cards and books and, maybe even a shirt. I don't remember, but, like their one purchase covered my table almost. So that was a blessing, but it was nice to actually be warmly welcomed after what felt like all that shunning. Then a little bit later, another lady swung by, and she was just super excited, about what we were doing. I don't remember what she bought, but she bought some stuff. But like, her big thing was like, she was just so excited. Her exact words, "I'm just so excited to see something from the kingdom here." And she was just really encouraged and whatever else. And that was a big blessing. And so it just really started kind of like the whole dynamic of the day started shifting. And the lady just looked at me. She says, "I'm going to pray increase over you." And yeah. And then a young lady who came by just kind of eyeballed the booth, and like, she had a stoic vibe. I don't think she was anti what was happening, but she was real stoic. And she's like, "I'd like to get this sticker, please." And she went to the "God is a fan of you" sticker. So I was like, "Oh, you can have it." She's like, "No, I will pay you for it." Just like, matter of fact, she's like, "There, exchange of goods," and just walked away. It's like, okie dokie. So, I rolled with it. I was trying to be generous. A little bit later, a dude came by who had a couple daughters with him, and he ended up getting a few books as well. And he says he owns a bookstore in Wilkesboro, and he'd like to have some of my books in the bookstore. So that's kind of cool too. Just good experience. What I thought was going to be a really dry day turned into being a really, really encouraging day. Now, full disclosure, I don't know how it turned out financially. Wasn't crazy concerned about it. I feel like expenses may have been covered. I don't know. Definitely for the table. I don't know about the hotel. But either way, it's fine. But like, I was so vibing on the conversations, I didn't really pay attention to any of it. And most of the transactions were cash. And so squirrel brain, totally don't remember. And the box with the cash is buried under 400 pounds of books, and I'm not moving it. Because I've got a con on Saturday, and I'm going to wait. I'll find out then. One thing I will say is that I restocked my shirts, and I had more shirts than I could fit in my tubs, at least in how they're currently organized. So I should be good on shirts for a while. I think I only went through maybe 2 or 3 shirts at the show. So again, should be good on shirts for a while. I had a furry cosplayer come by, and the cosplayers group stopped because they saw my Delicious in Dungeon sticker, and I talked to them. I was like, "Oh, I cosplay a Senshi from Delicious in Dungeon," and they wanted to see photos, and literally I showed them photos of me and my cosplay and the furry. Well, if you're not aware, furry is a cosplayer that dresses in a full body animal suit and imbues that animal's characteristics when they're in the suit. I showed them my Delicious in Dungeon cosplay, and the furry literally did like a Fortnite emote dance where they kind of just did a little jig. So that was fun. I had a couple dudes came by, and he's like, "What's going on here? What's with this?" And he had a Ninja Turtles shirt on, so I was like, or had a Ninja Turtles painting, so I told him, about the books, and told him like what the first Ninja Turtles chapter in the books is about, and eventually having Kevin Eastman on the podcast, we talked about it, and he ended up saying, that he grew up as a pastor's kid, and that he thought what we were doing was really cool, and he bought some books to support it. And like, I feel like out of the day, I had maybe 2 or 3 people that also just like told me to keep the change as a donation to the ministry. So really appreciated that too. Yeah, overall it was good. Some of my D&D party wanted me to bring back dice, so I made a couple little jogs over to the dice area. There was a booth that had dice by the weight. So I basically filled up a whole bucket of dice for £1, which ended up being $38 with taxes. But they gave me this whole pound of dice for my friend in a Crown Royal bag. So I'm just like walking around with a Crown Royal bag full of dice, keeping it gangster. But it was just a good show. I started out some of the show with some heavy anxiety because I had put myself in a place of a time crunch, because again, I do too much sometimes. I love John Foreman, lead singer of Switchfoot. I love Switchfoot. John Foreman's album In Bloom was my number 2 favorite album for 2024. John Foreman was doing the In Bloom tour currently, and the 2 nearest locations for the In Bloom tour were either Rocky Mount, Virginia, or Jacksonville, Florida. Rocky Mount, Virginia is 3.5 hours from my house. Jacksonville, Florida is 5 hours from my house. So Rocky Mount was the closer option. But the show started at 8 and the con ended at 5, and it was a 2.5 hour drive from point A to point B. And I, in all of my reckless wisdom, bought a ticket to this concert, knowing it would be by the skin of my teeth and the grace of God for me to even get anywhere near on time to this thing. And so that anxiety just kind of sat on me for most of the time. And I'm like, I got to get out of here, but I also don't want to be rude, and it's too tight of a space, and it's kind of freaking out. Just because I was sitting there and having anybody talk to about it. Yeah, all that stuff went on. Also, an artist named Kev, who I've dealt with in the past and interacted with in the past many times, came by. He's like, I didn't know you did art cards. He's like, you want to do an art swap? I thought that was cool. He wanted to swap me some of my art cards for some of his art cards. But I got so caught up with a lady that came by, which I'll tell you about in a second, that I just didn't make it over in time. He'd already packed up his stuff by the time it was over. Also, somewhere in the show, an entire wall of comic books got knocked over, and there was a whole hubbub about it. And I don't know if it was at this show, because one of the vendors was posting about it, but he had a booth set up at 2 different shows, so it could have been at the other show. I don't know. But either way, lots of craziness. But towards the very end of the show, a young lady came by, and she's like, oh, I'm loving this. She thought it was cool and everything. And she's like, listen, I'm reading the Bible through for the first time for myself. And she's like, and, I just made it through Joshua. And she's like, God is crazy. And, just kind of chuckled and listened to her. And she was just like kind of flabbergasted by the way the Old Testament people were living and by the way God handled it. And we talked very, very deeply and detailed about God's ways in the Old Testament and his people's ways in the Old Testament. And I'm not going to say it was all at reasonable volumes, because she got loud. I laughed. It was a thing. And you could tell that there were people around the room who were like, as we're talking about, like, the amount of people that died from disobedience and stuff like that. Like, you could tell there were people in the room who were like, I'm uncomfortable with this. And so we're going, we're having a really good conversation. And, she's like, it's really good to have somebody you can actually talk to about this stuff. Because I've been reading the Bible, but I haven't had anybody to talk to about the Bible. And listen, there were like 4 occasions at this one little show that were worth showing up for. But definitely getting to talk to this young lady was one of them. And the show owner ended up walking by the booth, and she kind of like grabbed him by the shoulder, and she said, hey, I'm really glad he's here. I like talking to him. And the show owner went in to say, oh, we want to have diversity, and we want everybody to have representation, and et cetera, et cetera. And then he made a statement where he said, it may get me some hate from some people, but I want everybody to be represented. So apparently, homie has gotten some smoke for my involvement. But I appreciate the grace. But I get it. For the people that actually not only just let me be at a show, but the people that actually promote me for being at their show, I get it. You probably catch some heat. Florence is promoting me at their show. Not heavily, but a little. And then, I get it. That it comes with the heat. Because some of the folks that came by the booth said that they had checked me out based on the Facebook posts that the show had made. But, like, that lady basically talked to me until the show was over. And I said, you know what? I'll get to the concert. When I get to the concert, it'll be okay. I ended up packing up, leaving, getting out, hitting the road. No stops, no gas, no food, nothing. And I made it to the concert with 3 minutes to spare. Ran into the show, got there as soon as the first song played. Enjoyed it, had a wonderful time. And at that point in time, I had really just focused on the fact it was 2.5 hours to the concert. And forgot about the fact it was 3.5 hours home. And the concert technically ended at about 10:05. But then that's when the encore started. And I said, you know what? I can't. It's 3.5 hours. I gotta go. I got church in the morning. I gotta remotely function. And so I made the choice. I'm going to miss the encore. I'm just going to go ahead and go. Now, if you know anything about John Foreman or Switchfoot, they are notorious for doing after concerts, which they did. When the concert ended and they did the encore and they closed out the venue where the concert was, they literally went into the farmer's market across the street and did a whole nother concert till like midnight. So I'm definitely glad I didn't stay. So I hopped in the car and I started driving. I had just enough gas in the van to get from Rocky Mount, Virginia to my driveway. The gas light turned on about 5 minutes on. But here's the thing. It was a 3.5 hour drive. I left it at a little after 10. I was going to get to my house at 2 o'clock. It wasn't until about 2.5 hours in that I realized it's also daylight savings time. So I'm not getting to my house at 2 o'clock. I'm getting to my house at 3 o'clock. And I've got to be leaving for church at 7:30. I was mad at myself and my foolishness and all of my shenanigans. I don't regret the concert. The concert was wonderful. I don't regret any of the experiences. It's moments that make you feel alive that you're grateful for. But oh my gosh, the amount of tired that overtook my soul to get back to the house in time. So it's a good experience. I don't necessarily suggest sandwiching a con with in between two concerts and a total of 12 hours driving. I don't think that's a great life choice for anybody, so don't do that. But yeah, that's my experience with Wilkes Comic-Con. They've got one in July. I will probably pass on that one just for the sheer sake of being sandwiched around other cons and camps and things like that. But I will do my best to return to one in the future because it was a good experience. Yeah. And so before I go, I want to take a moment to thank our Patreon supporters because y'all literally help make all the things possible. All of them. Rivka and Tristan Birch, Dorothy Winston, Michelle Stewart, Lynn Turner, David Brooks, Jeff Weimer, Colin Sproles, Jamie Montgomery, the Coleman family. I think I'm going to see Jamie Montgomery this weekend in Florence. The Coleman family, Jonathan Herman, Ron Petit, Gear Saber Cosplay, Scott Ward, Alicia Glenn, Jay Sheed, Jason Crutchfield, Mike Perna, Todd Turner, John Jacobs, Zach Harris, Caleb Grimm, Jeanette Skaggs, Jason Bullock, Christina Ray, Sarah Lewis, Patrick Gale, Rebecca Godlove, and Adam Davis. Thank you all for your incredible support. Y'all help make all of the things possible. You really do. Every bit of generosity and support that happens with Faith and Fandom, y'all are a part of. We're not really hitting any breaks anytime soon because we've got Florence Comic-Con, which is Power Comic-Con this Saturday. And gearing up for that. And then we have a week off before we head to GalaxyCon Richmond for the new extended GalaxyCon Richmond, which is going to go an extra day longer, where we are going to have Geek Church and Faith and Fandom discussion panel, and Rainn Wilson from The Office is now going to be present at the con, and there's a great potential for spiritual conversations there because he's a very spiritually focused person, even if it's not always in the right direction. We're gonna see if we can have some conversations and sharpen some various metals there. I appreciate y'all. I'm grateful for y'all, and I hope y'all have a great night or day. I don't know what time you're listening to this.